The night sky above Geneva rippled with impossible colors as 3 alien vessels breached Earth's atmosphere. Swirling clouds parted around sleek hulls that defied human engineering principles, one crystalline and refracting light like a massive diamond, another partially translucent with swirling gases visible within its containment fields, and the third covered in segmented plates that adjusted and shifted like an exoskeleton. Dr. Sophia Okafor, United Nations Secretary of Extraterrestrial Affairs, a position created just 6 hours earlier, straightened her jacket and tried to calm her racing heart. The hastily assembled welcome committee stood on the tarmac of Geneva International Airport, which had been evacuated and secured by a nervous international coalition of military forces. "Remember," General Williams whispered beside her, "show no fear. First impressions matter." Sophia nodded. "I'm more concerned about making a grammatical error in a language that might not even use verbs." A soft hum filled the air as the diamond-like ship settled onto the ground. No landing gear extended. It simply hovered 2 meters above the tarmac and stopped. A section of its crystalline surface liquefied and flowed downward, forming a perfect staircase. 3 beings descended, representatives of each vessel. The crystalline being led the procession, its body composed of interlocking geometric shapes that caught the floodlights and scattered them in dazzling patterns. Behind it floated a vaguely humanoid form composed of swirling amber gases contained within a nearly invisible force field. Last came the insectoid, its carapace shifting colors from deep purple to midnight blue as it moved with unsettling grace on 4 limbs, while 2 others gestured in complex patterns. "We are the Galactic Triumvirate," announced the crystalline being, its voice somehow projected without visible means. "I am High Speaker Azrael of the Jorits." It gestured to its companions, Nexus Mind Valdera of the Volusians and Director Kritisk of the Krylik. Sophia stepped forward. "On behalf of humanity and Earth, I welcome you. I am Dr. Sophia Okafor, United Nations representative." High Speaker Azrael's faceted head tilted. "Your civilization has achieved rudimentary spaceflight and global communication networks. Quite impressive for your developmental stage." Something in the tone made Sophia's diplomatic instincts bristle. She maintained her smile. "We're eager to learn about your civilizations and share knowledge of our own." "Of course," Azrael replied, facets rearranging into what might have been a smile with too many angles. "We bring the gracious opportunity for humanity to evolve under proper guidance. Your species shows surprising potential despite your biological limitations." Across the world, billions watched the historic broadcast. In a remote archaeological dig site at Göbekli Tepe, Dr. Eleanor Chen barely noticed the momentous first contact playing on her tablet. Her attention remained fixed on the stone tablet she had uncovered that morning, a relic carbon-dated to approximately 12,000 years ago. She traced her fingers across symbols carved with impossible precision into the ancient stone. Symbols that, impossibly, matched the glowing script now visible on the translating device worn by the Zorit ambassador on her screen. Eleanor's hands trembled as she took a photograph and sent it to her colleague, Dr. Javier Reyes at NASA's Exobiology Department. Her message was simple. Either ancient humans knew about these aliens, or something doesn't add up. Carbon dating confirmed. These markings are 12,000 years old. Reyes responded almost immediately. "Check the broadcast. Look at the Zorate's translation matrix display." She focused on the footage. Along the high speaker's crystalline arm, symbols flowed across a band of light, symbols identical to those on the tablet before her. "This changes everything," she whispered, as the implications began to take shape in her mind. Either aliens had visited Earth thousands of years ago, or humanity's past was far more complex than anyone had imagined. Back in Geneva, the triumvirate representatives were presenting the United Nations with a cultural exchange package and an invitation for Earth to join the galactic community as a developing protectorate species. High Speaker Azrael's final words of the broadcast resonated across the planet. "We have much to teach you about the universe. In time, With our guidance, perhaps humans might one day join the stars as equals. 3 weeks after first contact, Dr. Eleanor Chen stood in the basement of the British Museum, surrounded by artifacts hastily gathered from archaeological sites across the globe. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep as she compared holographic projections of symbols from Nazca, Mohenjo-Daro, Göbekli Tepe, and most recently, patterns discovered beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. "The dating doesn't make sense," Dr. Javier Reyes said, rubbing his temples. The astrophysicist had flown in from NASA the previous day, bringing stellar cartography data that only complicated their findings. These Antarctic markings are at least 1 million years old, predating modern humans by roughly 800,000 years. Eleanor nodded, placing a tablet beside a stone fragment. Yet they contain the same mathematical constants as the Zorit navigation systems they demonstrated last week. The museum's basement had become their unofficial headquarters, away from the media frenzy surrounding the triumvirate's diplomatic compound in Geneva. A scratched whiteboard displayed their growing list of impossibilities. Identical mathematical symbols across disconnected ancient civilizations, star maps showing celestial configurations from millions of years ago, and recurring imagery that matched elements of alien technology. "We need more evidence before going public," Eleanor said, carefully photographing the Sumerian tablet. "The academic ridicule would be career-ending." "Not to mention the political implications," Javier added. "The Triumvirate's technology exchange program is predicated on their position as the advanced species guiding human development." Their research was interrupted by Eleanor's phone. The screen displayed an invitation to the Triumvirate's Cultural Exchange Symposium at CERN the following day. All leading Earth scientists had received similar invitations. At the symposium, Eleanor and Javier presented carefully curated findings, omitting their more controversial discoveries. They mentioned the similarity between ancient symbols and triumvirate writing systems as interesting cultural parallels, rather than potential evidence of advanced human prehistory. The Zorit cultural attaché, junior speaker Lyrax, dismissed their presentation with crystalline chimes that the translator rendered as polite laughter. "Many developing species see patterns where none exist. Your ancestors likely observed natural crystalline formations and based their primitive writing upon them." The Volusian representative floated forward, its gaseous form shifting to amber. "Your imagination honors your species, but perhaps misinterprets coincidence as connection." Eleanor maintained her composure despite the dismissal. Later, during the reception, she found herself alone examining a display of Zorit historical artifacts when a voice spoke from behind her. "Your findings disturb certain factions within our alliance." She turned to face Admiral Sen, military commander of the Zorit contingent. Unlike the other crystalline beings, his form incorporated metallic elements and deeper blue hues. "I noticed no one addressed our carbon dating results," Eleanor said carefully. "Walk with me," Sen suggested, leading her toward a secluded garden terrace. Under the stars, his crystalline form glinted with internal light. "There are stories among our oldest records of a species that came before, beings who seeded the stars and then vanished. We call them the architects." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "What happened to them?" "Unknown. The records are fragmentary, preserved only in our oldest memory crystals." Sen's voice lowered. "The Triumvirate's primary mission isn't diplomatic. We search for traces of the architects across the galaxy, hoping to discover technologies even we don't understand." "And you think humans might have encountered them?" "I think," Sen said carefully, "your evidence suggests connections we never anticipated. The Krillic especially would find such suggestions disruptive to their worldview." From the shadows of a nearby installation, a small drone belonging to the Krillic delegation silently recorded their conversation, its optical sensors focusing on the human scientists' expressions of shock and the Admiral's treasonous revelations. "If humans had contact with the architects," Eleanor whispered, "wouldn't there be biological evidence as well as archaeological?" Admiral Sen's crystalline form briefly flashed with internal light. Precisely the question that most concerns us. Perhaps you should speak with your genetic researchers. As they continued their discussion, Meter noticed the silent departure of the surveillance drone, transmitting its data directly to Director Kritisk of the Krillic High Command. Dr. Maya Williams adjusted her microscope for the 5th time that evening. The genetics lab at the newly established Human Triumvirate Research Center hummed with activity even at this late hour. As part of the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative, she had been granted limited access to the Triumvirate Biological Database, a gesture the aliens had presented as generous, while carefully restricting the most sensitive sections. Maya stared at the comparison on her screen. Human DNA sequences alongside fragmentary architect genetic markers from the alien database. She had expected differences on an astronomical scale. What she found instead left her hands trembling. "This can't be right," she whispered, running the analysis again. The door slid open as her colleague Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Still here. It's almost midnight." "Look at this," Maya said, gesturing him over. "The base pairs in these architect fragments show a 97.8% structural similarity to human DNA. Hiroshi nearly dropped the coffee. "That's impossible. The chances of convergent evolution producing such similarity across different star systems are mathematically negligible," Maya finished. "But there's more." She pulled up another screen showing genetic sequences from the 3 triumvirate species. "I've identified markers in all 3 alien genomes that appear artificial, specifically engineered gene sequences that don't follow natural evolutionary patterns." "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning someone designed these species, enhancing specific traits while suppressing others." Maya lowered her voice, despite the empty lab. "And the estimated age of these modifications, approximately 200,000 years ago. The same time frame when Homo sapiens emerged," Hiroshi said slowly, the implications dawning on him. The following morning, Maya received unexpected news. She and her entire team had been selected for a prestigious research opportunity at the Mars Diplomatic Facility. The transfer was non-negotiable and scheduled for immediate departure. United Nations Security Officer Thomas Kwan reviewed the transfer manifest with growing suspicion. In the 3 months since first contact, his job had evolved from diplomatic protection to monitoring the increasingly concerning patterns in triumvirate behavior. 27 top human genetics researchers transferred to Mars in the last week alone, with minimal communication back to Earth. "Computer, show me all outgoing communications from the transferred scientists," Kwan instructed his secure terminal. "No communications found after transfer dates," the system replied. Kwan leaned back in his chair, decision made. 24 hours later, wearing the uniform of a maintenance technician, he stepped off the shuttle at Mars Base Harmony. His credentials, carefully fabricated by UN intelligence, granted him access to the station's utility systems. For 3 days, he mapped the facility while performing routine repairs, noting the heavily restricted Joint Research Wing, where no humans except the transferred scientists were permitted. On the 4th night, he accessed the ventilation system leading to this restricted section. Through a laboratory observation window, Kwan watched in horror as Krillic scientists moved between workstations where unconscious human researchers lay on examination tables. The insectoid aliens extracted samples: blood, tissue, spinal fluid, their mandibles clicking with what seemed like excitement as test results appeared on holographic displays. One screen showed a rotating DNA helix with sections highlighted in pulsing red. A Krillic scientist chittered to another while gesturing at the display. "Confirmation achieved," translated Kwan's concealed device. "The genetic coordinator sequences match. Humans contain the master templates." "Unacceptable," replied the senior Krillic. "If the Volusians or Zorates discover this, our position in the triumvirate would be compromised. The director must be informed immediately." "And the human specimens?" asked the first. "Continue extraction protocols. Once we have harvested the activation sequences, these specimens will no longer be necessary." Quan's blood ran cold. He retreated from his observation point, mind racing. This wasn't scientific cooperation, it was dissection. And whatever the Kryllik had discovered in human DNA had frightened them deeply. He needed to free the captive scientists and alert Earth. But first, he noticed something that made him pause. In a heavily secured chamber adjacent to the laboratory, a strange obsidian-like device pulsed with faint blue light. The Kryllik scientists approached it with unusual deference, almost like reverence. Or fear. Thomas Quan had 18 minutes before the security systems reset. Moving with practiced precision, he disabled the laboratory's alarm protocols using access codes extracted from an unattended Volusian terminal. The facility's night cycle had reduced staffing to minimal levels, but that still meant navigating past 3 Kryllik guards and a Jorite supervisor. Using a stolen medical cart, Quan approached the human containment area. 2 unconscious researchers lay on gurneys, prepped for the next day's procedures. Pulse steady, he nodded to the Jorite supervisor. Specimen transfer authorized by Director Kritsk, he said, grateful for the voice modulator concealed in his collar. The Jorite hesitated, crystalline facets shifting in what might have been suspicion. Verification code. Quan entered the sequence he'd memorized from observing earlier transfers. After an excruciating pause, the Jorite's facets realigned. Proceed. Heart hammering, Quan wheeled the researchers toward the maintenance elevator. 1 floor down, Dr. Maya Williams and 3 other scientists were recovering in a storage area where he had hidden them earlier. Administering stimulants, he quickly briefed them on the extraction plan. The shuttle leaves in 12 minutes, he explained. But there's something else we need to secure. Maya's eyes widened. The memory stone. Quan stared at her. The what? That's what they call it, the obsidian device. I overheard them. They believe it contains the preserved consciousness of an architect. Her voice shook. They've been trying to activate it for decades without success. 10 minutes later, Quan stood before the secured chamber housing the artifact. The memory stone rested on a pedestal, its black surface occasionally rippling with blue light. Using the override codes, he deactivated the containment field and approached it cautiously. Don't touch it directly, Maya warned from the doorway. The Kryllik scientists always used insulated handling equipment. Quan wrapped the stone in his jacket and secured it in a shielded sample case. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Their absence had been noticed. Run, he shouted. They barely reached the maintenance shuttle as security forces converged on the landing bay. The small craft broke free of Mars orbit, accelerating toward the UN orbital platform where reinforcements waited. 8 hours later, in the secure conference room of UN headquarters, Dr. Eleanor Chen examined the memory stone with trembling hands. The inscriptions matched those from my archaeological sites exactly. General Williams frowned. And you believe this contains what exactly? Information, Eleanor replied. Maybe the answers to who the architects were. She traced the familiar symbols etched into its surface. The question is how to access it. The Kryllik tried for years without success, Maya said. Their records suggested it requires some form of genetic key. Eleanor looked up, a sudden realization dawning. Not just any genetic key, the original template. She reached for the stone. Our DNA. Doctor, I wouldn't. General Williams began, but Eleanor had already placed her palm against the obsidian surface. The stone hummed, its surface rippling like liquid. Blue light pulsed beneath Eleanor's hand, flowing up her arm in luminescent veins. She gasped, not in pain but astonishment, as holographic light erupted from the stone's core, coalescing into the figure of a woman dressed in attire both alien and strangely familiar. Protocol 7 restoration initiated, the figure announced, her voice resonating with authority. Genetic confirmation. Original template species detected. Her gaze, though composed of light, seemed to focus directly on Eleanor. Welcome, architect. How long has it been? Eleanor swallowed. We don't know. We've forgotten. The hologram's expression softened. Memory loss was anticipated. Initiate historical restoration sequence. The room filled with three-dimensional images. Earth as seen from space, then scenes of ancient humans operating technology far beyond current capabilities. Before the Great Sleep, humanity reached across the stars. The hologram narrated. You engineered specialized species for cosmic terraforming, ecological stabilizers, builders, and planetary transformers. The images showed clearly recognizable Volusians, Jorites, and Krillic, in earlier evolutionary stages being genetically modified by human scientists. You were our greatest creations, the hologram continued, designed to prepare worlds for our eventual expansion. General Williams stared in shock. We created them. The triumvirate, Eleanor whispered. They're not our superiors. They're our children. Alarms screamed across every triumvirate installation on Earth and Mars simultaneously. In the United Nations Security Council chamber, emergency screens flashed red as satellite feeds showed triumvirate warships breaking orbit around Jupiter and accelerating toward Earth. They know, General Williams said grimly, watching the approaching fleet. How many ships can we get airborne? Against their technology. It doesn't matter, replied Admiral Sanchez. Our most advanced systems are centuries behind theirs. Eleanor barely heard the military discussion. The memory stone pulsed against her temples, cascading information directly into her consciousness. Coordinates, schematics, historical data, technological specifications, a torrential download that left her gasping. Her brain burned with knowledge never meant to be absorbed so quickly. Dr. Chen. Maya's voice seemed distant. Her neural patterns are spiking dangerously. Through the haze of pain and information, Eleanor forced words out. Sanctuary. Coordinates. We need to reach the hidden outpost. The triumvirate's ultimatum arrived minutes later. High-speaker Azrael's crystalline form filled the main screen, facets arranged in what humans now recognized as their expression of severe displeasure. Return the stolen relic immediately, the Jorite demanded. Surrender all humans with knowledge of its contents for proper processing. The penalty for non-compliance will be severe. We've discovered the truth, General Williams responded. Humanity created your species. The memory stone has confirmed it. Irrelevant primitives. Screech, Director Krisk, pushing into the frame. You cannot comprehend what you've stumbled upon. The artifact belongs to the triumvirate. Eleanor struggled to her feet, blood trickling from her nose. We need to leave. Now. 16 hours later, a desperate plan took shape. While Earth's combined military forces prepared defensive positions, a hopeless delaying action. A small team of scientists and military personnel gathered at the Vandenberg Space Center. 3 experimental spacecraft sat on the launch pad, originally designed for the Mars Colony Initiative, but hastily modified according to Eleanor's sudden insights. Engineers worked frantically, integrating concepts she could somehow visualize and explain despite never having studied advanced propulsion systems. These are more than ships, Eleanor explained, her eyes unnaturally bright as the memory stone's knowledge continued to integrate with her consciousness. They're seeds of something our ancestors left for us to find. Maya studied the modifications with astonishment. These systems shouldn't work together, but somehow they do. It's like watching technological evolution compressed into hours. As the team made final preparations, the first triumvirate bombardment struck the moon base, obliterating the scientific outpost in a flash of energy. Earth's defensive systems activated, buying precious time. They're targeting any facility capable of deep space travel, Thomas Kwan observed, strapping into his acceleration couch. They really don't want us leaving. Eleanor's fingers danced across navigation systems that somehow felt familiar. The memory stone contains more than history. It carries activation keys for systems our ancestors scattered across the solar system before their regression. Outside, chaos erupted as Earth forces engaged the first wave of triumvirate ships entering the atmosphere. Defensive batteries fired desperately at targets moving too fast to track effectively. Launch window closing in 30 seconds, announced the control center. Eleanor closed her eyes, accessing information flowing through her mind. Our ancestors faced something that forced them to retreat to Earth and enter technological hibernation. They created the triumvirate species to prepare the galaxy for humanity's eventual return, not as conquerors, but as guardians against something worse. The ship's engines ignited with blue-white fire never before seen on Earth. As they accelerated upward, Eleanor input the coordinates to Sanctuary, a hidden outpost established before humanity's great forgetting. We're detecting energy signatures consistent with faster-than-light capabilities, Maya said in disbelief as their ship broke free of Earth's gravity well. Eleanor nodded, her expression both pained and resolute. The knowledge was inside us all along, dormant in our genetic memory. The memory stone just woke it up. Behind them, Earth grew smaller as the ships activated their newly awakened FTL drives, disappearing into the depths of space, just as the main triumvirate fleet arrived to find their quarry gone. The journey through uncharted space stretched for 5 days. Eleanor drifted in and out of consciousness as the memory stone's vast repository continued integrating with her mind. The ancient knowledge burned like fire through her neural pathways, restructuring connections and awakening dormant capabilities. Her brain activity is unlike anything I've seen, Maya whispered to Dr. Rice as they monitored Eleanor's fluctuating vital signs. It's as though her cerebral cortex is being rewired in real time. On the 6th day, Eleanor suddenly sat upright on her medical cot. "We're close," she announced, eyes focused on something beyond the ship's walls. "I can feel it." Commander Phillips, formerly of UN Space Command, approached cautiously. "Feel what, exactly?" "Sanctuary," Eleanor replied, rising unsteadily to her feet. "It's calling to us." The navigation console chimed as they entered a turbulent stellar nursery, a massive cloud of dust and gas where new stars formed. The ship's sensors struggled to penetrate the chaotic energies swirling through the nebula. "Perfect hiding place," Quan observed. "Natural interference masks any artificial signatures." Eleanor placed her hands on the navigation panel, eyes closed. Information flowed between her and the ship's systems in ways the engineers couldn't explain. The vessel adjusted course, diving deeper into the nebula along channels of relatively stable space. "There," she whispered as the nebula parted to reveal their destination. Sanctuary appeared before them, a massive ring structure spanning 20 kilometers, constructed of materials that absorbed rather than reflected light. The ancient installation hung silent and dark within the protective shroud of the nebula, waiting. "It doesn't appear active," Commander Phillips said, studying the sensor readings. "No energy signatures, no running lights." Eleanor smiled faintly. "It's been sleeping, like we were, waiting for the right signal to wake up." As their ships approached the colossal ring, soft blue lights began illuminating along its circumference, spreading outward from the point nearest their approach. Massive sections of the structure shifted and realigned, opening a docking portal large enough to accommodate their vessels. "It's responding to our presence," Maya said in awe. Inside the docking bay, artificial gravity embraced them as they disembarked onto a surface that looked like polished stone but felt slightly yielding beneath their boots. The air cycled through environmental systems that hummed to life after millions of years of dormancy. "Welcome home, architects," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Holographic interfaces materialized around them, displaying information in the same symbolic language found in Earth's ancient archaeological sites. Eleanor approached a central terminal, her movements increasingly confident as she interfaced with the station's systems. Sanctuary's artificial intelligence recognizes our genetic signature. It's granting us full access. Ancient technology awakened at their touch, familiar yet incredibly advanced. Doors opened into vast chambers, filled with preserved knowledge and technology. Maya discovered biological archives containing genetic samples of thousands of extinct Earth species. Javier accessed astronomical data stretching back millions of years. According to these records, Javier said, studying a holographic star map, humanity didn't evolve on Earth. We engineered ourselves to survive there after retreating from the stars. Eleanor nodded, navigating through historical archives with intuitive ease. Our ancestors were pioneers who seeded the galaxy with tailored life. The triumvirate species were created with specific genetic predispositions and purposes. Commander Phillips frowned. Why would an advanced spacefaring civilization deliberately regress to primitive state? Necessity, Eleanor replied, accessing deeper archives. A gamma ray burst from a nearby stellar collapse was going to render most of the galaxy temporarily uninhabitable. Our ancestors couldn't evacuate everyone, so they established sanctuary and similar outposts, then retreated to Earth with genetically modified bodies designed to survive without technology until the danger passed. And the triumvirate species? Asked Thomas Kwan. Created to prepare the galaxy for our eventual return, Eleanor explained. The Zorites to build, the Volusians to balance planetary atmospheres, the Kryllic to terraform hostile environments. But something went wrong. They forgot their purpose and evolved independently. Sanctuary's observation systems suddenly pulsed with alerts. Long-range sensors detected the approaching triumvirate armada, dozens of warships converging on their location. They've tracked us, Commander Phillips said grimly. And we have no defensive capabilities. Eleanor smiled, her eyes reflecting the blue light of Sanctuary's interfaces. That's where you're wrong, Commander. Sanctuary was built to defend itself against the very technologies we gave our creations. Throughout the massive ring structure, ancient systems hummed with awakening power, preparing to face the children who had forgotten their creators. The triumvirate fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect attack formation, a three-dimensional array of warships surrounding Sanctuary. Their weapons systems powered up simultaneously, targeting the ancient installation with enough firepower to shatter a small moon. Inside Sanctuary's command center, holographic displays tracked each vessel's position and weapon status. Commander Phillips assessed their situation with grim professionalism. 57 ships, 3 distinct design philosophies. The Zorites favor energy weapons, the Volusians deploy gravitic distortion, and the Kryllic use some form of matter disruption technology. Eleanor nodded, her fingers dancing across control interfaces that responded to her touch as if they had been designed specifically for her hands. Sanctuary recognizes all 3 weapon types. They're using variations of technologies that originated here. The first salvos from the alien fleet streaked toward Sanctuary, blinding lances of energy, rippling gravitic distortions, and swarms of particles designed to unravel matter at the subatomic level. Seconds before impact, a translucent shield blossomed around the ring structure, absorbing the attacks without visible strain. Impossible, gasped Dr. Reyes, watching the sensor readings. The shield just neutralized everything. Not neutralized, Eleanor corrected. Recognized and countered. Sanctuary was designed by the same minds that created those weapons' original templates. The command center's central holographic projector activated, displaying a communications request from the triumvirate flagship. High Speaker Azrael's crystalline form appeared, facets arranged in what they now recognized as an expression of shock. How are you operating architect technology? The Zorite demanded. Those defenses haven't been active for millions of years. They recognize us, Eleanor replied simply. As they should recognize you, if you remembered your purpose. Before Azrael could respond, Director Kritsk pushed into the projection. Blasphemy. The Kryllic dominance will not tolerate these fabrications. We evolved naturally as the galaxy's rightful inheritors. Eleanor turned to Maya. Is the communications array at full capacity? Maya nodded. The entire system's operational. We can broadcast across all triumvirate frequencies simultaneously. Do it, Eleanor said. Send everything. The memory stones, historical records, our genetic comparisons, all of it. Every ship in that fleet deserves to know the truth. The broadcast began streaming to all vessels in the Triumvirate fleet and beyond, to every colony and outpost across known space. The complete historical record, including irrefutable genetic proof, flowed outward in a wave of revelation. On the Triumvirate vessels, confusion spread rapidly. Multiple Zorite ships broke formation, weapons powering down. Several Volusian craft moved to defensive positions, their commanders openly questioning the Krylik's aggressive stance. Admiral Tsen's voice cut through the channel. "High Council, the evidence cannot be dismissed. These humans bear the genetic markers of the architects we have sought for generations. I am ordering all Zorite vessels to stand down." "Treachery," screeched Director Kritsk. "The humans have corrupted your crystalline mind. The Krylik will destroy this abomination and cleanse the galaxy of this human deception." The remaining Krylik ships regrouped, charging weapons for another assault. 3 Zorite cruisers moved to intercept them, positioning themselves between Sanctuary and the Krylik attack force. "I acknowledge the architects," Admiral Tsen announced formally. "As first protocol demands, I offer protection to the progenitor species." Across countless worlds, the revelation spread like wildfire, challenging every foundation of triumvirate society. On colony planets, Zorites and Volusians gathered around communication hubs, processing the shocking evidence of their engineered origins. Among the Krylik, division erupted between younger generations willing to accept the truth and conservative factions, clinging to their belief in natural superiority. Inside Sanctuary, Eleanor watched the fleet with a mixture of sadness and hope. "They'd forgotten so much," she said softly. "They were never meant to develop independently for this long. The gamma radiation was supposed to dissipate within 10,000 years, not force us into a million-year amnesia." "What now?" asked Commander Phillips, watching as the fleet divided itself between those accepting the revelation and those rejecting it. "Now we remind them who they were meant to be," Eleanor replied, "activating Sanctuary's most powerful communication array, and hope they're ready to remember." On the main screen, the Krylik ships launched their attack, weapons blazing against the shields that had once been created by the very beings they refused to acknowledge as their makers. The Krylik attack faltered against Sanctuary's impenetrable defenses. Energy weapons dispersed harmlessly against shields designed specifically to counter them. Director Kritsk's flagship pressed the assault with increasing desperation, its weapons cycling through frequencies and modulations in a futile attempt to penetrate the ancient barriers. Eleanor observed the conflict with growing sadness. "This isn't what our ancestors intended," she said, turning to Maya and Javier. "Follow me. I've discovered something in Sanctuary's core systems." Deep within the station's central hub, they entered a chamber that activated at their presence. A circular platform hummed with energy as Eleanor stepped onto it, interfacing directly with Sanctuary's primary systems. "Our ancestors left more than technology and historical records," she explained as holographic displays materialized around them. They left a contingency plan for reconnecting with their created species. The displays showed intricate genetic sequences, the command protocols buried within triumvirate DNA. "With these codes, we could assert direct control over every triumvirate being," Eleanor said softly. "Their genetic structures include master override sequences designed to ensure they couldn't turn against their creators." Commander Phillips studied the controls with military precision. "We could end this conflict immediately. Force a stand-down." "We could," Eleanor agreed, "but that's not why these were preserved." She accessed deeper levels of the system, revealing not control protocols but communication channels, genetic-level connections designed for guidance rather than domination. "Our ancestors didn't want slaves," she explained. "They wanted children who could grow beyond their programming." Outside, the battle reached a turning point. Several Krylik ships, commanded by younger officers, broke formation and powered down weapons. Admiral Tsen's Zorite cruisers established a protective perimeter around Sanctuary, joined by Velusian vessels responding to appeals from their homeworlds where the truth had already begun reshaping societies. Eleanor activated Sanctuary's primary communication array. Her voice, amplified and translated by technology designed for this very purpose, reached across the fleet and beyond, to every triumvirate world and outpost. "People of the triumvirate," she began, "we understand your confusion and fear. The truth about your origins challenges everything you've believed. But we didn't create you as servants. Our ancestors designed you as companions for the greater journey ahead." The holographic displays showed ancient human scientists working alongside early triumvirate species, not as masters and servants, but as collaborators with specialized abilities working toward shared goals. When disaster forced humanity to retreat and forget, safeguards were built into your genetic codes, not to control you, but to ensure we could reconnect when the time came. That time is now. Eleanor transmitted the complete genetic records, not the command codes, but the full history of each species' development and intended purpose. "We offer you choice. Partnership as equals in the legacy our ancestors began, or independence to forge your own path. What we will not do is claim dominion over you. That was never our purpose." On the primary screen, Director Kritzk's flagship finally powered down weapons. The insectoid leader's image appeared, mandibles clicking in what might have been resignation. If we are truly created beings, what purpose were we designed to serve? To transform hostile environments into habitable worlds. Eleanor answered, "Your species excels at environmental engineering, abilities we needed for our expansion, but couldn't evolve naturally." "And the Jorits?" asked Admiral Sin. "Builders and crystalline data specialists, designed to construct and maintain the infrastructure of a galactic civilization." "The Velusians?" "Atmospheric harmonizers, capable of stabilizing planetary climate systems and preventing ecological collapse." In the days that followed, representatives from Earth and the triumvirate species gathered aboard Sanctuary for a historic ceremony. The ancient ring structure hummed with renewed purpose as the covenant was signed, not as creators and created, but as family separated by time and circumstance, now reunited. Human knowledge merged with triumvirate innovation as they began reactivating other architect outposts across the galaxy. Eleanor accessed Sanctuary's long-range sensors, studying the readings from beyond the galactic rim with growing concern. "What is it?" Maya asked, noting her expression. "The reason our ancestors created the triumvirate in the first place," Eleanor replied, showing her the sensor data. "The cycle begun millions of years ago is approaching completion. The threat our ancestors fled has returned." Across the chamber, humans worked alongside Jorits, Velusians, and Krillic, preparing for the challenge ahead, not as separate species, but as the family of civilizations the architects had always intended them to be.